bottom and let the ash out. And I propped that open because it would go out,
Yes.
just sitting there. But with that open, there's just enough draft
To keep the flame going.
to keep it going. So we will increase the draft immensely. Get it where I need to hold it the right way. And we're going to twist it 360 degrees to the right. Oops. Now you can see how it has rounded. It's not flat like this anymore. So we're going to heat it back up, and we're going to flatten it, square it back up. Let's step over here for a minute. I'll show you what we're doing. Okay. And I've already put this groove in it. You put a groove in all four sides with chisel when it's hot. And I had that in there. What we just did is this. So you see how round this is. So what we're going to do now when I bring it out is we're going to square it back up. And then once I get it squared back up, I'm going to put this mark back in it with a chisel. I'll go from here to here with a chisel. And then we're going to get it hot, and we're going to turn it the opposite direction 180 degrees. And we'll get what we call a basket twist. In this case, I made like a garden spade. I've made all kinds of stuff. It just makes a nice handle, you know, for most anything. I'm gonna brush the little scale off of it. You can see we're square again.
Good things. And then at some point you got interested in blacksmithing. So one of the first questions I had as I thought about all that is, when you were a young kid, what did you want to grow up and be?
Probably a farmer. You know, that would have been my first choice, probably.
Yeah.
And then I thought maybe a veterinarian. And then I realized pretty quick I wasn't smart enough to be a veterinarian. I had taken, in high school, I'd taken a year and a half of vocational carpentry and cabinet making, which was a half-a-day deal. And I got interested in construction.
Okay.
And then as I investigated construction, I realized that it paid pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then the teacher that I had, he actually got recruited to go to Big Rapids, Michigan, to Ferris State, which is now Ferris State University, to start up the construction technology program up there.
Okay.
And so he and I were pretty good buddies, and so he convinced me I should go up there.
Yeah.
And so that got me started in the construction. So I crammed a 2-year degree in almost 3 years.
I crammed it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, there was a certain social aspect to being away from home and all that.
Sure.
And the other thing I did wrong was in high school, you know, they ask you if you intended to go to college and stuff. Well,
Yes.
I'm smart enough to know that if you say yes, you're going to take harder courses.
Yeah, right.
But I'm dumb enough to didn't realize that if you actually did go to college, you got a problem.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a lot of the background you should have.
Yeah, okay.
That didn't help me at all.
Yeah.
Vietnam's going on,
Okay.
and Uncle Sam wanted me,
Yeah.
and he wanted everybody else.
Yeah, sure.
And the good news was I did not go to Vietnam, which was amazing because everybody was going to Vietnam.
Right, okay.
But amazingly enough, I got selected to be a part of a little bitty island in the middle of the Indian Ocean called Diego Garcia. And I found out that when the deployment was going to happen, that there would be one guy from each craft stay back in the States for an expediter. And I decided that should be me in my craft. Because I was not married yet, but I was engaged to Nancy. And so we were getting in the fall, and I had finally got this position tied down to where I was going to stay in the States. And so I got a hold of Nancy. I said, hey, we can go ahead and get married because, you know, I'm not going anywhere. And so we did. So now I've got a brand new bride of about a month. And so we rented this room that had a fold-out couch for a bed. And our kitchen was the kitchen for the camp for the deaf mission. So we had this long table, and we sat down there by ourselves at the end.
At the end of the table?
Yeah, and I didn't have any wheels, so I had to beg rides or walk, and this was quite a ways from the base.
Okay.
And once you got to the base, it was like 9 miles from the gate to the CB camp.
Oh, wow.
So I did a lot of walking.
Yeah.
But, you know, we were a young married couple, and we were together. When it's small, it heats fast and it cools fast.
Yeah.
You know. So we'll. You can see the metal moving under the hammer. Now we've cooled it out, so we'll heat it up again. When you draw metal out, you always draw it out square. If you want it round, then you turn it up on edge. And you keep doing that. So you make it, what would that be, octagonal or hexagonal?
Yeah. Fast forward a long ways, and you got interested in blacksmithing somewhere along the way.
Right.
So how did you get interested in blacksmithing?
Well, the Indiana Blacksmith Association, which goes by IBA, has their annual conference here at Tipton at the fairground. And so after we moved here, we didn't know anything about that, but Nancy would go to town and get groceries or whatever and come home and say, hey, the blacksmiths are here, you know.
Yeah.
And so we went over there to find out when they did this every year. So, because every time it happened, it's like we had something else going on. And so we earmarked the date and went over there, and I took a beginner class that they offered and was hooked. If we were going to do forge welding or open fire welding, we'd have two pieces in there, and we'd bring them to welding temperature. And the way you know you're at welding temperature is kind of by the look. It's very difficult. Just after welding temperature, it's too hot and it's sparking. So if you usually just start to see the sparks come, you know you're getting real close. And there's different kind of sparks. So the sparks you're seeing right here, that's just ash that the air is blowing up. But when we start to see the metal sparks, they'll be more of a starburst. And we're not quite there, but we're close. Now, see those sparks there?
Yeah, see these.
The little white ones?
The little sparkler, yeah. They get too hot.
That means that piece is burning on the end, and it's getting too hot. So, I'll bring it out here. So that is an example of metal that's burnt. The carbon is burned out of it. And if you were doing a project, what you do is you just cut that off right there and start over.
Yeah, because you ruined it. Yeah.
And the way you do that is with this Hardy. So you just take that. This is just an interesting thing to me. I think there's about 15 or so references in the Bible about blacksmithing. So I mean, it's a profession that's been around a long time.
Yeah.
And it was an extremely important profession up until probably 100 years, less than 100 years ago.
Yes, right.
You know, and so, but now it's a hobby for me.
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting. Is there anybody's profession today that someday will be somebody's hobby? You know?
Yeah. So like all these computer geek heads, is that just going to be somebody's hobby?
Yeah, you know, so, you know, who would ever thought that a blacksmith, that would become somebody's hobby? You know, I was raised in a Christian home.
Right.
I never heard my dad swear, so I never learned to cuss. And so that's never been a problem for me because I just never learned it, and I never liked the taste of lava soap. So then you go into the Navy,
Yeah.
and you know, what's the old saying? They cuss like a sailor or whatever.
Right.
Well, you don't fit in very well. And then from the Navy, I end up in commercial construction,
Yeah.
and that's a pretty rough bunch.
Right. Yeah.
And you don't cuss, so you don't fit into that group very well either.
Yeah.
And so what I did, I guess, what the Lord taught me was how to gain people's respect
Right.
without that. And then, consequently, try to pass that on to other people.
Sure.
And at one time, I had two superintendents that were like opposite guys that worked for me, and I called one the old school, one the new school. The old school guy was the typical superintendent, construction superintendent, scream and yell, cussing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
The other guy, who I learned a lot from, was quiet. He would do a schedule. He would tell everybody this is what we're going to do, this is when we're going to do it, and everybody learned real quick that that's exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you weren't ready, that's not his problem. That's your problem. And about one time of not being ready, they learn.
Yeah.
And so I thought that's interesting. You know, he can do this without cussing and raising his voice and all that sort of thing. So there again, you got to overcome that. I guess my point would be, it's not easy being different,
Yeah.
whether it's your testimony or whatever, but it's okay.
Today.
Well, yeah, you know, I think in school, if you teach driver's ed, that one of the requirements should be that you can change a tire.
Sure. Uh-huh.
I mean, I don't think you ought to have a driver's license unless you can change a tire, and I don't care if you're a boy or a girl.
Yeah.
You know, you ought to be able to change your own tire.
Yeah.
And that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
You need to know how to check the oil.
Yeah.
All those real simple things. You know, at one time when you bought a new car, it came with instructions on how to adjust the valves.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
Yeah. How we've changed.
Yeah. If you have a certain amount of ingenuity or you think that way, you're interested in how stuff's made.
Yeah.
And when Glenda and I started traveling, that's one of the things we did was we went, any factory that had a tour, we'd go to it.
Yeah,
I don't care what they make. I want to see how they do it.
Yeah.
And so if you watch like oil painting, you watch somebody do it, I thought, you know, I bet I could do that. But the trick, there's a lot of tricks to it. There's tricks to every trade. I don't care what it is. There's always the shortcuts, tricks. A lot of us having the right tools, you got to have the right paint, you got to have the right brushes, you got to have the right stuff. And if you had the right stuff, and maybe with a little bit of instruction, maybe you can do it. Well, I'll tell you what, humility is something that you can, it's not easy to accept, but when you think you're pretty good at something, then you need to go and see somebody that's good at something.
Yeah, right.
And then you'll just be really,
Yeah, you've been humbled.
you'll be reduced.
Yeah.
And that's the way the blacksmith is. Save a little bit of this, just bring it out here like so, and it will just go out pretty quick, rather than burn out.
Wasted, yeah, wasted. Yeah.
And rather than waste it.